Yeah, I remember when I had a chance to be in the Canadian military, one thing I enjoyed the most about it was a chance to travel. And I think if every single Canadian got a chance to travel and see our nation, see the different cultures, and see how each area is unique in its own way, then we'd find we'd have a nation that would be more closer together. So that's what I would support. I would support something like what you're saying, the Air Cadets and that, and Sea Cadets, because it gives our youth a chance to travel throughout Canada, and it gives them a chance to see what Canada really is as a nation. And also in the past, when I was in the military, the peacekeeping role, I would have to agree with you with that. We did have United Nations peacekeeping roles, but at the same time, we didn't have anything infrastructure put in place whereby we would support the Canadian people. I mean, we had OCA happening where the military was brought in. We went over to Bosnia Herzegovina, where that was almost the beginning stages of the combat for the modern day Canadian military. And what we saw is overnight we saw our military. When I joined the Canadian military in 1986, I joined a military that I quite enjoyed what I saw. I mean, I saw a military that was basically based on peace and that stuff, what I saw. But then as the 90s started hitting, I started to see the changes within the Canadian military. I started to see the change of the more militaristic. And in 95, when I finally left the military, I just couldn't I couldn't be a part of it because, I'm someone that I want to see Canadian people be protected. I want to see peace. I want to see the Canadian people back in Canada. I want to see the Canadian troops used to protect Canada. Yes, you can go on peacekeeping tours, but you go on peacekeeping tours where you're not going to put the soldier in danger or have to put him in a combat role. I do not support that.
Yeah, well, I think that many people go into the armed forces because of the kinds of values that you were just talking about. And I think it would be great if there was another option for them and a more explicitly nonviolent peacekeeping role that they could participate in and give action to those very very important values that they hold. I want to make sure that we get away from possibilities in Canada of one of the criticisms of the situation with regard to the war in Iraq. Some people say that Vietnam, it was a draft and that was different. That the people who signed up for the war in Iraq did so voluntarily. But there are other issues. There's the whole issue of the poverty draft, where people Americans in an attempt to escape poverty in their communities, to get an education that they wouldn't be able to afford otherwise, sign on to the military. And I think we have to make sure that doesn't happen here in Canada. I think we've skirted that, for a long time. For instance, until recently, and it may still be the case, Newfoundland was highly overrepresented in the Canadian Armed Forces in terms of a percentage per capita, and lots of folks believe that was because of the economic difficulty that Newfoundland had until very recently been experiencing, and that was a way for folks to get training, to make something of their lives that wouldn't have been possible for them normally. So I think there are issues around having a military, how the military operates, that we need to be very cognizant of, and that we need to make sure that there are other options out there for folks who want to express those values of patriotism, express those values of ensuring that there's harmony in society and around the world, and that they have the options to do that kind of work in the best possible context.
Yeah. Also, when you were saying stuff there, Bill, I noticed that you're talking about certain people in the United States are actually forced to join the military because of economical reasons. Thank God that they had Hibernia over in Newfoundland area, so it helps the people that live over in Newfoundland to at least they'll be able to get a job with that. But we're seeing parts of Canada right now because of this economical crisis that's going on, and we're seeing it happening here in BC, where our deficits start to go higher and higher. Sooner or later you're going to start seeing a mass amount of people from the Canadian population heading in there. So what I'm hoping that basically the we're able to create the jobs to keep the people, out of the military, and we're able to create the infrastructure to allow the people to, at least we have, we're more of a peacekeeping. We're not warlike anymore. That's what I'm fully support. Because I don't want Canada to become a nation of, like war nation, which basically, therefore, we'd be putting most of our money into our military infrastructure. We'd be putting more of our money into, our youth would end up, a whole generation would be lost. And I don't want that to happen because we've already lost enough soldiers. We've lost over 100 soldiers over in Afghanistan. When is the spilling of Canadian blood going to be too much? I mean, that's the biggest question we should be asking each other. How many more soldiers, young soldiers, do we want to sacrifice for a war that was illegal to begin with?
Yeah, I think most Canadians have wanted Canadian soldiers to be back from Afghanistan a long time ago. And the fact that, today we have the 128th, 129th soldiers killed there is something that I think every Canadian has incredible difficulty with. And certainly from my part, the most difficult things that have the most difficult decision, the most difficult debate that I sat through in Parliament was the debate around extending that mission in Afghanistan. And my biggest disappointment since I was elected was seeing that resolution pass by less than 15 votes, and knowing that there were that many MPs who chose not to be there to vote on something. I can't imagine anything more important for an MP to be present and voting on than a decision about keeping or sending people to fight in a combat role in a war. And for me, that was the low point of my parliamentary career when I sat in the House that day and saw that decision get made with those people not participating. We have to take this very, very seriously. I think one of my fears about going into another election period now is that we need to be pressuring the government about how we withdraw from Afghanistan. What's the plan? How are we getting out completely, or is the plan to move our troops to some other role in Afghanistan? I, for one, think we should be home. I don't think there's any other role for us once we've played a combat role in that country. We certainly can't go into peacekeeping work when we've been one of the combatants. What kind of role is Canada playing in terms of encouraging peace talks? I see Britain and Germany in the news today calling for peace talks, but there's no mention of Canada in that. I saw how Jack Layton was ridiculed when years ago he suggested that Canada should be talking to the combatants, the people who were fighting against in Afghanistan, to see what possibilities there were for peace. These are the kinds of things that we need to be working on now, and pressuring our government about. And I guess if we have to do that in the context of an election, I'd welcome the opportunity to see Afghanistan and what happens there be one of the issues that we debate and talk about in the campaign. Because I think people in my constituency are pretty clear about that. And I think if they were voting on that basis, they'd want to vote for an MP and for a party that was very clearly opposed to the war in Afghanistan.
Also, Bill, when you were raising the issue about Mr. Layton getting ridicule about his stance on Afghanistan, I remember some people telling me that members of the NDP are actually getting ridiculed because of your stance to help the war resistors and also your stance to bring the troops home. What I'd like to basically say, if you could tell these other members of the federal parliament from a veteran standpoint that anyone who ridicules someone who wants to stand for peace, and you've not done your time over there to begin with, well, then I classify those people as chicken hawks. Anyone that wants war is not willing to fight for it. But anyone who's basically been to a war situation like myself and doesn't want it to happen anymore, it shouldn't happen anymore. So if you could just send a message to these other members of the federal parliament, just tell them that, look, if you're going to basically talk about war, basically there's veterans out there that have done their time who are saying, no, we've done enough war, enough of our blood has been shed, we have to bring our troops home, and if you don't like that, well, then you can leave Canada and go down to the United States where they do support war.
Well, Ben, I think it's very interesting that the debate on Afghanistan has never been an easy one, and those of us who've raised questions about the war in Afghanistan have often been accused of not supporting our troops, not supporting the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces, and that's the farthest thing from our minds. I think by raising questions, we believed all along that we were supporting them in a very direct kind of way, wanting to make sure that they weren't sent to risk their lives in a war that Canada didn't support, that Canadians didn't support, and we think that was that has always been the case in this war in Afghanistan. And we're prepared to take that kind of stuff. It's been there have been very hurtful things said in the House of Commons to folks who've called for a withdrawal from Afghanistan. Hurtful things have been said to me about that, but that doesn't that's nothing compared to what we're asking the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces to undertake on our behalf. And if we're not absolutely clear about that, if we can't take responsibility for that as elected officials and as a country, I find that deeply troubling. So. I can handle the criticism of those folks, and I know that when I raise questions about our mission in Afghanistan, that there are folks who've served in the armed forces, and that there are folks currently serving in the armed forces who are glad that those questions are being raised because they know the importance of them.